The Texas Chainsaw Massacre is a 4v1 multiplayer asymmetrical horror game where you play as either three members of the homicidal Slaughter family, or you play as one of the five victims that are available with the start of the game thus far, not counting potential future DLC. Now, at the beginning of every game, after you've chosen what side you're on, what character you've chosen to play as, you will start off in the basement if you're a victim, or if you're a part of the family, depending on who you're playing as. If you're playing as Leatherface, you will also start in the basement. But if you're playing as a victim, let's focus on that. If you're playing as a victim, you will start off restrained in the basement, and you have to utilize a specific button, in the case of the PlayStation 4 and PlayStation 5 game, the square button, to try to free yourself from the shackles that have confined you. Now, this is where you get your first introduction at one of the biggest things about being a victim, and essentially even being a family member, because you're trying to hunt down and kill these victims. And that is the fact that noise is a big thing about this game. If you make noise, specifically trying to break loose, or trying to open up a door, or walking through one of the noise generating bone chimes that are hanging at various points, because if you're making a lot of noise as a victim, one, of course you'll indicate to the family where you could be or where you've just gone through. And most importantly, when it comes to the family, if you're a victim trying to avoid death, is awakening Grandpa. Now, Grandpa, from the family perspective, is a sonar. He is a character that if the family is allowed to level up, he will become a force because he is allowed to do sonar. He will scream out and it will cause a sonar reaction. So if you're moving as a victim while he's screaming, it will actually identify where your location is by highlighting your character. So you have to be still. It does give you a warning if you're a victim that Grandpa's about to scream out and identify who is moving. But the higher the level, the easier it is for you to be identified, because at max level, it doesn't matter if you're moving or staying still, Grandpa will identify you. Now, to alleviate this problem, you can actually stab Grandpa if you grab one of the bone fragments from a pile that are scattered throughout the basement area. And this not only disables Grandpa temporarily, but also will de-level sonar abilities. So that's something to be very mindful of if you're a victim. If you can get close to Grandpa and not be identified, you can stab Grandpa and remove the ability for him to utilize his sonar ability. Now, escape is the main goal when it comes to being a victim. And there are various ways that you can escape. You can turn off a car battery and unlock a gate that will allow you to get out. You can find a fuse and put it in the fuse box upstairs to open up a gate. You can also turn a valve and open up a gate. But if you notice what I've stated, a majority of the time, opening up gates is your way to exit. Now, there are other options that you can maybe make it to the road and run away from there, specifically in the gas station map. And that's the thing about this game. It is one of the most harrowing experiences as a victim because you're so vulnerable. You can be easily hit, even if you are able to slip through the cracks, even if you're able to hide, even if you're able to utilize the special abilities, because that's one of the big things about every character, not only the victims but also the family, having specific special abilities. If you utilize them, it still feels like you may be up against the wall when it comes to a good team of family members of slaughterers. Now, going back to the victims, as I stated, they all have special abilities, and that's not counting the perk system, the skill tree that I'll talk about later on. Every character has a specific ability that levels up as you use it more. For example, Connie has the ability to lockpick a lot easier than other characters in the game and make a lot less noise when opening up gates than, say, Sonny, who has the ability to utilize his own sonar to identify both victims and family members' movements. Leland can actually plow through enemies. He can knock down family members other than Leatherface, who he'll just temporarily stun, but it does help give you the opportunity to get away if you are cornered, if you're playing with Leland. On the opposite end of the spectrum, there are the family members whose abilities are rooted in not only trying to prevent escape, but also killing individuals. For example, if you're using Leatherface, The more you utilize this chainsaw and actually killing characters, it will level up and make it a lot easier for you to upgrade your chainsaw so it won't, say, overheat, or you can use it for a longer period of time without it overheating if you rev it up too much. And these upgrades, when it comes to these special abilities, are completely separate from the upgrade points that you're given for the skill tree itself. And the skill tree itself allows for perks that are very beneficial depending on which ones you get. There are several spots where there are randomized perks that may or may not be beneficial. But for example, blood collecting that you have to utilize to feed Grandpa. If you're playing as Sissy, that is one of the main things you want to get as a perk, and try to upgrade that by utilizing as much as possible, because the more blood you give to Grandpa, the quicker his level for the sonar will increase. And a very interesting thing they did when it comes to the skill tree is the fact that it has branching paths that are cut off depending on what side of the path you choose. If you have the option of going left or right, and you choose left, the right side will be completely cut off. But you can respec your skill tree, so you can remove all of the attributes, all the perks that you've gained. But thankfully, if you have upgraded those perks, say going back to the blood collecting for Sissy, and I respec my skill tree, it won't lose that blood collecting level perk, but it will lose the ability to get that perk unless I unlock it again. Now, skill points only come from leveling up your overall profile, and those experience points come from just completing games and trying to do your best, trying to survive as long as you can, or even escape as a victim, and of course killing off the characters if you are a part of the family. Of course, with the leveling of your profile, you get these skill points. For each level, you get 5 skill points that you can spend in the skill tree across the board. There are no individualized skill points per character depending on who you're using, unlike, say, Evil Dead the game, which I think was a lot better of a way to incentivize playing with a variety of characters instead of being just locked into just upgrading one character, because you're utilizing the skill points across the board. And that's one of the biggest issues when it comes to this game, is because it is a game that is rooted in leveling up. The better you do, the more points you have, the more you play, the better your characters will be overall. And without a system to isolate players based on their profile level, you will have characters that are high profile level mixed with low profile levels. You will have characters that have upgraded their Leatherface to max level 10, and other characters where victims are literally at level 0 across the board, profile and character wise. So it's one of those things that the later you play this game, the worse it's going to be for you to try to get into it and enjoy it, because you'll be playing against higher level players who have become dedicated to the game compared to those who maybe just get it 2 or 3 months after it's been released. Now, I will say that as fun as this game is, and I've enjoyed it a lot, though it did take a little bit of time before I really did get into a groove and feel like I was enjoying it, is the fact that this game does have quite a few technical issues. I've had graphical glitches, I've had hit detection issues that are very frequent. I noticed that across the board, especially if you're a killer. It can be one of those moments where you know for a fact that you will hit an enemy and it will not stop them. This is also coupled by the fact that enemies have a bleed out debuff that is happening actively. As they get hit, the more they bleed out. But they also have the ability to recover, so if they can find a well, they can drop down into the well as you're hitting them and have a chance to recover. But of course they have to work their way back or get back to whatever escape route they were trying to reach. I've had some very, very weird things happen. I don't want to say that it's cheaters, but I know that there have been talks about the fact that the game came released with the developer's code in the PC version actually being able to be accessed by removing literally one file. And that has allowed certain players on the PC versions finding the ability to pretty much break the game. There was one victim that actually just disappeared while we were chasing them in the middle of a chase. There was no reason for the character to disappear. There was another one, this was the most profound, that they actually got behind the fencing. So they were able to run past us and stay on the opposite side of the fence that we could not reach. And then there are moments where you will just be stuck in a situation, going back to the leveling system, where you are being ping-ponged by victims who apparently have an infinite amount of bone spires that they can stab you with and stun you, or utilize the door to knock you down without you even having a chance of recovery. And then the biggest issue is the fact that the game has a terrible problem with timing out the connection. Pretty much every day that I play this game, I have at least 2 or 3 games that are lost because of the quote-unquote network has timed out error. My internet connection is fine every time that it happens. There's no dropped internet. There's nothing that would make me think that it's on my end. And I'm not the only one that's had this problem. It is an issue because if the connection is lost, all of your progress up to that point is also lost. So if you're in the middle of a game and you're doing absolutely great, you know you've racked up a lot of experience points up to this point, and the game times out, the network connection times out, none of that will be counted, and you lose all of that progress. And I've heard of people that have actually had this issue and it's literally wiped out everything. Their save will still be there, but all of their points, all of their levels, profile or otherwise, will be wiped out. It is a terrible bug that needs to be fixed. They are promising that they will get it straight in the near future, but right now it is a very, very bad bug. When it comes to content, that's also a lacking problem. As I noted, there are 5 victims and 5 family members that you can play as, with, of course, Granddad being the unofficial 6th member of the family when it comes to playable characters. And while that sounds like a variety, the playgrounds, the maps that you are able to enjoy are limited, very, very limited. Literally, there are only 3 maps, with day and night being the only things that differentiate each. And it's not like a lot of things change between the day and night. Unlike, say, Dead by Daylight, where you had this randomized nature of how the maps were laid out, this is pretty much straightforward no matter what map you're playing as. The exits pretty much stay the same. The locations of, say, the fuse box is always the same. There's nothing really to change up things when it comes to the map, especially if you learn the map yourself. So if you learn it as a victim, it becomes painfully easy to get out. There have been some ridiculous moments where a game will last 3 to 4 minutes because all of the characters, all of the victims have figured out exactly where to go to exit before the killers can even get their feet wet and figure out what's going on. And this is a problem that will continue on because this is how the game is built. It's not like it is built to have randomized maps. And with characters and players getting better and more leveled, it'll just become a lot easier for the victims to figure out escape routes. And tying into the future of the dwindling player base is the fact that a game cannot start unless you have 7 players. You have to have 3 killers and 4 victims. If you don't, the clock will tick down and the lobby will disband if you do not have enough players in time. Hopefully this is something that has changed and maybe you'll get a bot to fill in for the spot that isn't occupied. But for right now, you have to have 7 players. Then by the time the game does get old enough and people are not playing as much, it'll be impossible to find the game without some kind of offline functionality like they gave Friday the 13th. Overall, I actually do really enjoy this game. There's a lot of fun to be had at this time when it comes to the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. But it's one of those games that I worry about the future. Not only because of the potential player base drop off after a few months, especially if there's not a lot of extra DLC being added, but also because it's a system that isn't rooted in being very new player friendly if the game is 6 or 7 months or even a year old. And I know you could say that a lot about a variety of asymmetrical multiplayer games, especially when it comes to this genre, but it just has to be reiterated that if you don't jump in now, you'll be left behind and you'll never be able to catch up. If you can ignore that problem, there's still quite a few issues, from technical issues, graphical glitches, hit detection, and of course the network timing out error that is detrimental to the progress of any player. If you can, rent this game. Play it for at least, I say 2 to 3 hours. Get at least about maybe 10 to 15 games in. Try both as a victim and as a family member. Because for me personally, the first hour or 2, I will say, I didn't really enjoy it. I thought it was boring. But it wasn't until I really got the hang of it, I really understood some of the intricacies of the gameplay, that I started enjoying it more, and I still feel like I'm learning as I play this more and more. But it still feels limiting in certain aspects, and as the game progresses, I wonder how well victim players will be able to just wipe the floor with killer players, because they're already starting, and we're not even a month after the game has been released. If you do feel like you want to buy this, if you do feel that this is the type of game for you, I suggest do it now. And thankfully, it's not a full price game. It's not $60 or $70. It's only $40. So it's really actually a very good price for what they offer at this point in time. I wouldn't wait. I would try to get it as soon as possible if this is the type of game for you. But if you can't, if you feel you're on the fence, definitely rent it and find out whether or not it's fun being Leatherface or victim before it's all said and done.
Damn these freaks. Are they really gone?